And welcome everyone to Chapter 11, where we're going to be exploring equinoxes and do they begin God's new solar year. Now, as I mentioned in the earlier chapters, God's calendar is what? Lunisolar. That ought to be evident by now. And that means it makes use of both the sun and the moon, doesn't it? So, one half of God's calendar is composed of a solar year, isn't it? Which is managed or overseen by the sun. Whereas the other half of God's calendar is what? Composed of a lunar year, which is managed or overseen by the moon, obviously. And in addition to that, friends, a solar year normally consists of 365.24 days, while a lunar year typically consists of 354 days and 12 lunar months, or 13 lunar months if it happens to be a leap year. Now, just to confirm what I'm telling you here, let's see what a science-based resource has to say about solar and lunar years. And this resource is from the site Sciencing in their article, The Time Period of Lunar and Solar Years. It goes on to say the definition of a lunar and solar year. Quoting now, a lunar year has approximately 354 days. A solar year has 365 days. 12 lunar months make up a lunar year. A lunar month can also be defined as the time the moon takes to pass through each of its phases, the new moon, the half moon, and the full moon. And friends, as we've discussed many times, Genesis 1:14 through 18 tells us that one of the most important functions of the sun and moon is to do what? It's to show humanity when to keep God's annual holy festivals, right? Right? Let's read that scripture again just to refresh our memories. Quoting, it says, "Then God said, 'Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night.'" And they'll do what, friends? They will serve as signs for festivals and for days and for years. And that's from the Holman's Bible. And just what part does the sun play in showing us when to observe God's holy events and festivals? That's a legitimate question to ask. What's its part in all of this? Well, the sun is responsible for beginning and ending God's days, isn't it? Which we know run from sunset to sunset. The sun also begins and ends God's 4 literal seasons of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And just how does the sun tell us when these seasons have begun and ended? Isn't it by the arrival of the Vernal Equinox, the summer solstice, the autumnal equinox, and the winter solstice? Well, let's see what time and date has to say about this, friends. Astronomical seasons. Quoting, the astronomical definitions uses the dates of equinoxes and solstices to mark the beginning and end of the seasons. Number 1, spring begins on what? The spring equinox. Summer begins on the summer solstice. Winter begins on the winter solstice. The beginning of each season marks the end of the last. Well, that certainly makes sense, doesn't it? And finally, and this is where we're going in the segment of the presentation, the sun begins and ends a solar year, now keep that in mind, which is also known as a tropical year. Again, from timeanddate.com. How long is a tropical year / solar year? Quoting, it says, a tropical year, also known as a solar year, and let's keep that in mind, that they're interchangeable, and is on average approximately 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 45 seconds long. So it really, rounding it off is 365.24 days. So with this information, we find that a solar year is also called a tropical year, right? And is approximately, as I just said, 365.24 days long. However, because the Earth's speed is not constant, the length of the tropical years can vary up to 30 minutes. But just when does a tropical solar year begin and end? Hey, it begins on a vernal equinox. How about that? and ends on the next vernal equinox. Now let's see what sciencing and also NASA has to say about this. Back to sciencing. A tropical year, quoting, also called a solar year, measures the length of time between two vernal equinoxes. How about that? Doesn't measure the time from January the 1st to January the 1st. And NASA says the very same thing about when a tropical solar year begins and ends. Let's see what they say. Calendar calculations, NASA technology, quoting, the tropical year is a period of time required by the sun to pass from vernal equinox to vernal equinox. The tropical year is used to do what? Listen to this, brother. To keep track of seasons, planting, and harvesting. How about that? How about that, friends? Does the fact that tropical solar years are used to keep track of seasons, planting, and harvesting sound like there might be some kind of connection between solar years and God's spring and fall festivals, which God placed around times of harvesting? It's pretty interesting, isn't it? You see how all these things start playing together? God's involved with it, friends. God's involved with it, and he knows what he's doing. And in addition to that, since the tropical solar year runs from one vernal equinox to the next, then it includes a complete cycle of all four seasons, doesn't it? The season of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. So now let's summarize what we've learned about a solar year. A solar year is also called a tropical year. Let's keep these things in mind as we move through the presentation, please. It is approximately 365.24 days long, and it begins on the vernal equinox and ends on the next vernal equinox, which includes a complete cycle of all four seasons. And just to keep it simple, I'm going to mostly refer to the tropical solar year as just a solar year from this point forward. Now, does the Bible ever refer to a solar year? Hey, that's the most important point, isn't it? And the correct answer to that question is absolutely it does, if you know where to look. But you know what? You might have a little trouble finding it. You know why? Because it's only mentioned 876 times in 646 verses. Well, that's just a little calendar humor for you here. And I know, very little humor. Okay. Now, let's take a look at one of the scriptures where the solar year is referred to. And that would be Numbers 32:13, where we find the English word years, which was translated from the original Hebrew word shaneh. Numbers 32:13. And the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years. Now let's take a look and dissect this word years here. It's Strong's number 8141, and it's pronounced shaneh. And what does it mean? A year as a revolution of time. But you know what? Strong's doesn't give us much information on the definition of that, does it? So we're going to take a look at the Dictionary of Biblical Language and its definition of the Hebrew word shaneh and what it really entails. It says, quoting, a year, as an example, a unit of time, involving a complete cycle of all seasons. So we find that a shaneh year also consists of a complete cycle of all four seasons, just like the solar year, don't we? And what does that mean? It means that a shaneh year is also approximately 365.24 days long. And how do we know that? Because any time you measure the number of days from the beginning of one season, any one season, through the remaining three seasons, it will take approximately 365.24 days. And it really doesn't matter which season you start with. But does the Bible's shaneh year also run from one vernal equinox to the next, just like the solar year? Well, let's take a look at Exodus 12:1 through 2 again and see what God has to say about the first month of his year. And the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year, the Shaneh, to you. Now, doesn't Deuteronomy 16:1 go on to tell us that the name of the month God is referring to is Abib, the spring month when Passover is observed? Let's take a look at Deuteronomy 16:1, where the Lord says, observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto the Lord your God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord your God brought you forth out of Egypt by night. And as many festival observers already know, after the Jews' captivity in Babylon, the month of Abib became known as Nisan, or Nisan as we call it today. Now let's see what Nelson's Illustrated Bible Dictionary has to say about this. Abib, it means sprouting or budding. The first month of the Hebrew calendar, corresponding to our March or April. After the captivity, the month was called Nisan or Nisan. And doesn't God's first month of Abib or Nisan take place in the season of spring? Well, let's see what Harper's Bible Dictionary says about this. Quoting, Nisan, the first month of the Old Testament year. Nisan falls in the spring, March or April, and corresponds to the earlier Hebrew designation of Abib. So, friends, we find what? We find that Abib is not only the first month of the spring season, it's also the first month of God's new what? Shaneh, his new year. But what cosmic event began God's spring season and his new year? Well, since the sun oversees God's seasons and years, what's the only sun-based solar event that ends the winter season and begins the spring season and starts a new Shaneh solar year? Well, let's let Matthew Poole's commentary answer that for us. You might be surprised what it has to say. Matthew Poole's concise commentary on the Bible, Exodus 12:2. This month, when God was referring to this month, was the first month after the vernal equinox. Get that, friends? It was the first month after the vernal equinox. It was called Abib or Nisan. This new calculation, meaning God showing them when his year started, began the year with the spring, which renews the face of the earth. And you know what? Matthew Poole's commentary is correct when it states that the month of Abib or Nisan took place after the vernal equinox had arrived. And why? Because something had to end the solar year and winter season, right? Before the spring month of Abib or Nisan could take place, right? I mean, how can you start the first month of a year before the year even begins? That's just not possible to do, is it? And just what is the only solar event that takes place that ends the winter season and begins a new year and a new spring season? It's the vernal equinox. That's the only solar event that takes place between those two seasons, right? And it ends the winter season and begins the spring season, right? And did you know that the very word vernal actually means spring? Did you know that, friends? How about that? And I'll let you investigate that for yourselves. I've investigated enough for you. And since the vernal equinox begins God's new Shaneh year, his new solar year, with its new spring season, it's the next vernal equinox that ends that year, isn't it? If one starts it, one has to end it, right? So we find that God's Shaneh year also runs from one vernal equinox to the next. Now, let's compare the features of God's Shaneh year with those of the tropical/solar year. We find number one, what? They're both 365.24 days long. Number two, they both begin on the vernal equinox and end on the next vernal equinox. And they both include a complete cycle of all four seasons, right? if godsbiblicalcalendar year begins on the vernal equinox and ends at the next vernal equinox, it has passed through all 4 seasons, correct? So, brethren, we find that our solar year, mankind's solar year, and godsbiblicalcalendar year are exactly the same thing, don't we? They're just called by different names. And since a solar year makes up 50% or 1/2 of God's lunisolar calendar, this information, friends, is absolutely necessary for us to know in order to do what? To correctly calculate the dates for God's annual festivals, isn't it? It's very important for us to know what begins and ends his year, his physical solar year. Not his festival year, his physical solar year. And by covering this information, we're better equipped to do what? To investigate the equinoxes and solstices and see if what? They are really referred to in God's Word, and if they're essential factors in calculating God's festivals and his calendar, because a lot of people don't believe that they are. So please, friends, join me in the next segment as we share additional insights into God's biblical festival calendar in the sky. Please join me there. Welcome back, everyone, to this segment as we continue to study equinoxes and find out, are they referred to in God's Word in the Bible? Now, the term equinox actually means equal nights. However, over the centuries, this definition seemed to have expanded to mean equal day and equal night. But in reality, friends, the actual days on which the spring and fall equinoxes appear, the nighttime and the daytime hours are not exactly equal. I mean, a day when the daytime and nighttime hours are truly equal is called an equinox. And when discussing God's calendar and equinoxes with church groups, I can guarantee you, because I've been there, I know what I'm talking about, that there'll be one calendar enthusiast who will jump up and say something like, the word equinox is not in the Bible, and the Hebrew word tikva does not refer to equinoxes. So equinoxes do not perform any role in calculating God's festival calendar. Well, are these statements true? Well, the answer is kind of yes and no. No, you won't find a literal word equinox in the Bible, and why is that? Because the word equinox is a Latin word believed to have been first recorded in AD 1588. So the literal word equinox could not have been part of the original Hebrew and Greek text of the Bible, could it? I mean, that's no brainer. However, there is a Hebrew word in the Bible that does refer to the 4 points or markers which Jesus strategically placed in the Earth's orbit around the sun. And these 4 points actually mark the beginning and end of Earth's 4 seasons. And that Hebrew word is tikva, which we find in verses like Exodus 24:32. Now, friends, let's see what the following Bible resources and scholars have to say about the word tikva. Now, the word tikva is Strong's number 8622, and it means a revolution. An example, it says, of the sun, the course of time or a lapse of time, like the period of gestation of a child from the time of conception to the time of birth. The Complete Word Study Dictionary of the Old Testament goes on to say that it means a feminine noun indicating a turning around, a circuit. A turning around, like when you're going in a circle and you keep moving in a circle, you keep changing directions, don't you, as you move around in the circle. It indicates the completion of a yearly cycle. That's another definition. It's used to describe the circuit or passage of the sun across the sky. And you can see the scriptures referred to there. Gesenius, his Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament says, tikva, circuit as of the sun, hence the course of time of a season after the course of a year. So it involves seasons in a year, right? A concise Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament says of the word tikva, a turning of sun at solstice. And he gives the scripture, Psalms 19:7. A turning of the year, an example, the end of the year at autumnal equinox, Exodus 34:22. And friends, this is one area where the Jews do possess a more accurate and better understanding of the meaning of the word tikva, and they understand it much better than most of today's festival observers. And in Judaism 101, it says, Glossary of Jewish Terminology, tikva, and it has several different spellings, as you can see. An astronomical turning point, an equinox or solstice, or the season associated with that turning point. Now let's review or summarize the main points that we learned from these different resources about the correct definition of the Hebrew word tikva, which are, number one, circuit or passage of the sun across the sky. Number two, a revolution of the sun. Number three, it indicates the completion of a yearly cycle, a solar year, because it's dealing with the sun, right? It signifies a turning around a circuit. To come about, it means. To turn about, to come about. The turning of the sun at an equinox and a solstice. The season associated with that turning point. So we're beginning to see the definitions of the word tikva and how they apply to the Earth's orbit around the sun and turning points. It's all there. God put it all there for us to see. We just have to search. We will find if we search, friends. So the Hebrew word tikva refers to 4 specific solar events that take place throughout the Earth's orbit around the sun, don't they? And these events are the day, the vernal equinox, the summer solstice, the autumnal equinox, and a winter solstice arrives. And tikvas can also refer to what? The first day of the season of spring, summer, autumn, and winter, so they say. It can also refer to the whole season itself, like spring, summer, etc. It refers to not only the first day of spring, summer, winter, or fall, it can also refer to that whole season. Now, is there any historical evidence that the word tikva was used outside of biblical texts to mean a season? Well, yes, there is. You know what? In the book Shar Olat HaShabbat by Johann Meyer, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls is discussed, which contains the Hebrew word tikva. And this scroll reveals 13 special songs that were sung on the Sabbath, most likely by the Jewish sect known as the Essenes. And on page 146, Meyer writes, the songs themselves are attached to 13 Sabbaths of 1 quarter, or season, or tikva of a year. According to the editor, the first quarter, the Nisan season only. So these Dead Sea Scroll fragments that they found that contain these 13 songs, these spiritual songs that these Jews had written, and had written for the season, the first season of the year, that centered around Nisan or Abib. How about that, friends? How about that? Here's historical evidence that the ancient Jews also understood the word tikva to refer to the seasons. And you know what? Speaking of seasons, how many of our viewers know exactly what creates God's seasons? Do you have any idea? You ever thought about that? Well, many haven't, but you know what? It's a very, very important thing for us to know. So let's take a look at a short video that reveals what Jesus did to the earth in order to create our seasons. I think you'll really enjoy this.
The Earth has seasons because its axis of rotation is tilted, a property it shares in common with some other planets in the solar system. It's tilted by an angle of 23.5 degrees to a line perpendicular to its orbital plane, shown here in green. Incidentally, the Earth shares this orbital plane with all the other planets in the solar system. From Earth, we see this plane as an imaginary line that all the planets and the Sun seem to follow through the sky. We call this line the ecliptic. Here we see the Earth on the 22nd of September, the autumn equinox, when the northern part of its axis is not pointing towards or away from the Sun, and day and night are exactly the same length. Next is the winter solstice, when the northern hemisphere is pointing away from the Sun. Following on is the spring equinox, when day and night are equal lengths again. Then we move to the summer solstice, the longest day in the northern hemisphere and the shortest in the southern hemisphere. And finally, we're back to the autumn equinox again. The word equinox comes from the Latin words for equal and night, equi, nox. The final part of the story is that the Earth's orbit is not perfectly circular. In fact, the Earth's orbit is rather eccentric and elliptical, and during the northern summer, the Earth is furthest away from the Sun at 152 million kilometres, as opposed to 147 million kilometres during the winter, when it's closest to the Sun. So you can see that the Earth's axis is tilted in the same direction all year round. The seasons are caused by the Sun's energy hitting the northern or southern hemisphere more directly as it orbits the Sun on its tilted axis. So that's what causes the seasons.
Now that just amazes me, friends. It really blows me away that Jesus tilted the earth at a 23.5-degree angle in order to create our seasons. And did you know that? That's amazing, isn't it? Now, did that happen, friends, as a result of some big bang explosion in the universe? Or was it carefully designed and planned by super intelligent, all-powerful spirit beings with a distinct plan and purpose in mind? I think we know the answer to that, don't we? Now, let's take a look at another video which discusses the 4 very important points that Jesus placed in the Earth's orbit around the Sun, which marks the beginning and end of our 4 seasons and God's solar year. Now, let's take a look at our 4 points video. Okay, friends, now here's a little visual that will help us better understand the 4 points or markers that Jesus put in the Earth's orbit around the Sun. And you know what? It really doesn't matter if some calendar advocates don't believe that tikvahs represent equinoxes or solstices, and neither does it matter what mankind calls them, because that's not going to change what Jesus created them to do. And that's the important thing for us to keep in mind, isn't it? Now, these points were divinely ordained for a specific purpose, and whatever label a human puts on them is not going to change. So, keeping that in mind, we could do what? We could call this first marker what? Point 1 or spring, couldn't we? And the next marker, point 2 or summer. Next one, point 3 or autumn. And the next one, point 4 or winter. Well, we could go on and call marker 1 the vernal equinox, marker 2 the summer solstice, marker 3 the autumnal equinox, marker 4 the winter solstice, and we could keep going and call marker 1 the spring tikvah, marker 2 the summer tikvah, marker 3 the autumnal tikvah, and marker 4 the winter tikvah. Now, just what happens, what physical occurrence or signs take place on our planet when these points are reached in Earth's revolution around the Sun? Well, when the first turning point is reached, what happens? The vernal equinox appears. The season of spring begins. A new solar year starts. And the Sun is positioned directly over the equator, which does what? It makes everything shadow fall exactly east and west, doesn't it? Now, when turning point number 2 is reached, what takes place? Boom! Summer begins. The summer solstice takes place, doesn't it? And we have the longest day of the year, don't we? So there's another sign happening, a sign we can see and measure, right? And when the third turning point is reached, what happens there? The autumnal equinox appears. The season of autumn begins. The Sun is positioned directly over the equator again, which makes everything shadow fall exactly east and west. And when the fourth turning point is reached, what happens there? Boom, the winter solstice. The season of winter arrives, and we experience the shortest day of the year, something we can again measure, another sign from God, right? Now, friends, as I said earlier, it really doesn't matter what we call these points or markers, because all of these events are signs, God's physical signs that appear on earth and helps us to know when to keep God's annual festivals, and a name change is not going to alter that. Period. End of story. For these God-ordained signs tell us when the Father and Christ's new solar year and 4 seasons have begun and ended, and that is crucial information that we have to know in order to accurately calculate God's biblical holy day calendar, right? Now, I don't care. You can call them Larry, Moe, Curly, or Shimp. You can call them Groucho, Harpo, Chico, or Zeppo. It's not going to change what Jesus did, and we need to just accept that and embrace it and move on, right? Right. And as I stated in the last segment, friends, since it's the sun's job to mark the beginning and ending of God's natural seasons and his tropical solar year, some cosmic solar event had to occur that would signal and mark the end of the winter season and begin the spring season, right? And also begin a new tropical solar year. And again, the only solar event that takes place between the seasons of winter and spring is the vernal equinox. So it can only be the vernal equinox that begins God's new solar year, his Shana year, right? What about the word tropical now? What about the word tropical? It's involved with what? The solar year, a tropical year. Does it have any significance or relevance to the biblical word tikva? Well, let's see what author Alan Longstaff of the National Maritime Museum has to say in his article entitled The Year of Seasons. Now, quoting from The Year of Seasons by Alan Longstaff. How long does it take to complete one cycle of the seasons? Defining the length of the year according to the seasons has been central for the development of most calendars. Modern astronomy defines the year of seasons or tropical year as the interval between 2 successive vernal equinoxes. Now get this. The word tropical comes from the Greek tropos, meaning to turn. What? Meaning to turn, and refers to the fact that the sun moves south to north and back during the course of the year of the seasons. Ha, friends, aha. What about that? Did you notice the words to turn? Now, doesn't that ring a bell? Isn't that one of the main definitions of the Hebrew word tikva? Again, looking back here at the Complete Word Study Bible Old Testament, a feminine noun indicating a turning around, a circuit. Now, friends, doesn't all of this information confirm that the word tikva does indeed refer to the 4 turning points in the Earth's orbit around the sun, and that 2 of these turning points are equinoxes and 2 are solstices? So, does the Bible make reference to the equinoxes and solstices? Absolutely, just using the name tikvas. And it was none other than Jesus himself, friends, who made the seasons and set these 4 markers or points in the Earth's orbit around the sun. In order to do what? In order to show humanity when his seasons began and end, as well as his solar years. What an awesome creator we have, friends. Let's take a look at a couple of scriptures here. John 1 through 4. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. Psalm 74:17. You, speaking of the Lord Jesus, have set all the borders of the earth. You have made summer and winter. Who set those markers there, friends? Genesis 8:22. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest and cold and heat and summer and winter and day and night shall not cease. Whoa. Who made them? Christ Jesus made them. And he set them there for a reason, markers to show us when to keep the Father and his holy events and festivals. And friends, anyone that disregards the importance of the equinoxes when calculating the dates for God's annual festivals will always end up with the wrong dates. And why is that? Because calculating the correct dates for God's holy festivals is totally dependent upon knowing what sign in the sky ushers in the spring season and starts God's new solar year. And as we have proven, that sign is what mankind calls the vernal equinox. Live with it, accept it, friends. It's a truth. And please be on guard, because some poor misguided calendar advocates claim that equinoxes and solstices are evil because ancient pagans used them in the worship of their idols. But you know what? These same people seem to forget that it was Jesus himself that created these points in the orbit of the earth around the sun. Not pagans or their false gods. Satan didn't create them. And in addition to that, God warned the people not to worship his creation, only the creators of the heavens and earth. But has mankind obeyed God's decree over the past 5,000 plus years? Not for the most part. So just because Satan has inspired many to worship what God created does not make any part of God's creation evil, does it? For when Jesus had completed creating the heavens and the earth, which included equinoxes and solstices, he declared it was very good, didn't he? In Genesis we read, "And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good." It wasn't just good, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. Now, friends, just because some ill-advised people state that something God created is evil does not make it so. It doesn't make it true. So, friends, please don't let anyone mislead you regarding the importance of equinoxes, solstices, and God's true biblical calendar in the sky. For anyone that ignores the role of the vernal and autumnal equinoxes when calculating the dates for God's holy festivals are in error before they even begin. So we asked the question, were the elders that wrote the Hebrew calendar study paper correct when they stated, quoting, "We now ask the question," they say, "when does the year begin? Does the Bible define for us the precise moment when the new year begins?" They go on to say, "No, it does not." But brethren, didn't we find that the complete meaning of Shana, God's solar year, along with God's statements in Exodus 12:2 and Deuteronomy 16:1, do indeed show us the precise moment when the new year begins? We certainly did, didn't we? So now, dear friends, do you understand better why God's word cautions us to be careful and to prove all things and to hold fast that which is good? And I pray that those words are becoming more and more important to you every day. Let them sink in so that no man deceives you, please. So please stay with us as we continue to investigate which calendar today's saints should be following. And welcome everyone to our next segment that's still dealing with the issue of the vernal equinox and asking the question, should we be choosing the new moon that appears or occurs closest to the vernal equinox to set God's calendar, or should we be choosing or using the new moon that occurs on or after the vernal equinox? Now, as we've already learned, it's the sun, by the way of the vernal equinox, that does what? That tells us when God's new solar year has begun, and also does what? It launches a new spring season, right? But it's the moon. It's the moon that determines when the first month of God's festival, religious or lunar year begins, as well as the rest of God's months throughout the year. And here's where the next critical calendar question comes into play. And that question is, and we've already kind of introduced it in the introduction here, quoting, "In order to correctly calculate God's festival dates, do we choose a new moon that occurs closest to the appearance of the vernal equinox, even if it occurs before the vernal equinox has arrived? Or do we always choose a new moon that occurs on or after the vernal equinox has arrived?" And although this has been a very hotly contested calendar issue, it should be one of the easiest calendar questions to correctly answer. And why is that? Well, since God's solar year begins with the vernal equinox, and the first month of his new year begins with the appearance of the new crescent moon, if we choose a new moon that occurs before the vernal equinox arrives, then what are we doing? We are starting the first month of God's new year in the winter season before his new Shana solar year has even arrived. And friends, as I said earlier, that's simply impossible to do and not be an error, as we talked about in the last segment. And you know what? There's another serious problem that sometimes takes place when we're using the new moon that occurs before the vernal equinox has arrived. And what is that? You can end up with 2 first days of Abib or Nisan in the same Shana or solar year. Let's say that again. You can end up with 2 first days of Abib or Nisan in the same Shana or solar year. Now, let me explain to you what I mean. And we're going to be using the dates for Nisan the 1st that the Jewish calendar, the Hillel Jewish calendar, used for the years of 2020 and 2021. And according to the Jewish calendar information that we now see on the screen, we find that the Jews set their first day of Nisan in 2020 to be March 26th, and their first day of Nisan in 2021 to occur on March 14th. And we see that here with these 2 red arrows, and we also see these 2 asterisks. And if we look at the top, it means it started at sunset on the 25th and on March the 13th. So their first day of Nisan would actually have been March the 26th and March the 14th. Let's keep that in mind, because God's days start at sunset. Now, friends, we're going to take a look at a short video that I put together, which is going to help us see how choosing the new moon that occurs closest to the vernal equinox oftentimes creates 2 first days of Nisan in the very same solar or Shana year. Okay, friends, so now let's address this festival calendar controversy about choosing the new moon closest to the equinox in order to set the first day of Nisan and see if it has any merit. And hopefully we can bring this matter to a truthful conclusion once and for all, because it's been a hotly contested issue for decades and decades. So let's see what really does happen when we use the new moon that occurs closest to the vernal equinox to calculate God's festival calendar. And we're going to begin by verifying that we are indeed using the exact same dates for the first day of Nisan that the Jewish calendar utilized for the years 2020 and 2021. And of course we see right here March 2020 and down here March 2021. Now in March 2020 we see that the vernal equinox occurred on what? On the 19th day of March, right? Right here. And what did that do, friends? It began a new solar Shana year and also kicked off a new spring season, right? And the Jews chose their first day of Nisan to begin on March 26th in 2020, right here, which is obviously around 7 days after the vernal equinox had arrived, right? Now, let's move down to 2021 for a moment. And as we can see, in 2021, the vernal equinox occurred on what? On the 20th day of March, didn't it? And the Jews that year had chose March 14th, right here, as their first day of Nisan, which we can see, occurred about 6 days, before, note that now, before the vernal equinox had arrived. So now let's find out just what happens when one year The new moon closest to the equinox occurs after the vernal equinox has arrived, and then the very next year. The new moon that is closest to the vernal equinox does what? It occurs before the vernal equinox arrives. Now, friends, didn't we recently learn that God's solar Shawnee year runs from one vernal equinox to the next vernal equinox? We sure did, and we spent a lot of time investigating that, didn't we? So God's new year, his new solar year, in 2020 began on the 19th day of March, right? But it won't end until when? Right here, March the 20th, 2021. Now, keeping this information in mind, let's follow the red arrow down from the Jews' first day of Nisan 2020 to the Jews' first day of Nisan 2021 and see what takes place. Watch this, friends. So we'll start up here at the beginning of the red arrow on the first day of Nisan 2020, and we're going to follow it down to Nisan what? 2021. And what do we find, friends? We find that by using a new moon that occurred before the vernal equinox arrived, the Jews began their first day of Nisan what? In the winter season. Before the vernal equinox had even arrived and started a new year and kicked off a new spring season, right? Because the vernal equinox starts a new year in God's year. But they started their first day of Nisan what? In the winter season, didn't they? And please tell me how you can legitimately start the first month of a new year before the new year even begins. Friends, that's simply impossible to do, isn't it? And there's another problem that takes place when we use a new moon that occurs closest to the vernal equinox. And what is that? Using a new moon that occurs before the vernal equinox arrives, it does what? It also creates two first days of Nisan in God's solar year of 2020, doesn't it? Just look at this, friends. Here's the first day of Nisan 2020. It occurred after the vernal equinox arrived and started the year 2020, correct? And as we move down here, we've got another first day of Nisan, what? In the year 2020, right? Because 2021 doesn't start until the vernal equinox arrives. So now we've got what? Two first days of Nisan in the year 2020. And that creates another serious problem, friends. That leaves the entire year of 2021, without any first day of Nisan at all. How about that? How about that? And this illustration should provide forensic proof to any saint who is genuinely seeking truth, that using the new moon, which occurs closest to the vernal equinox, friends, is just a flawed, faulty, and incorrect method to use when calculating the correct date for God's first month of Abib or Nisan. For this method will not, friends, produce a consistently accurate festival calendar. Now, come on. This is not rocket science, and we don't have to be astronomers or astrophysicists to understand the problems with Hillel's festival calendar. So let's just use some good old common sense and look at this from a viewpoint that we might relate to a little better. Now, what would you think if you purchased next year's Gregorian calendar? That's the calendar we use here in the United States. And it had two first days of January on it, just like the calendar we see on the screen. You see right here, we have one first day of January. We have another first day of January, right? I've got to believe you would be returning that calendar to the store, wouldn't you? And I imagine you'd be complaining that it was defective and that a serious calendar error had occurred. I mean, how can you start a new January 1st before December 31st has taken place? Well, let's consider a very important question then. Why would it be any different with God's calendar? I mean, isn't two first days of Nisan in the same year also a red flag that something is very wrong, is seriously wrong with the calendar formula Hillel uses to set his first day of Nisan, and that his method is unreliable and defective? Shouldn't that be a red flag to us? Again, we don't have to be astrophysicists to see that starting the first day of spring in the winter is just pure nonsense. So, we find that using Hillel's Molade conjunction moon that occurs before the vernal equinox has arrived does the following. Number one, it begins the first month of God's year before his new year has even arrived. It also starts the month of Nisan in the winter season before the season of spring has arrived, and it sometimes places two first day of Nisans in the same solar year or Shana year, leaving the next year without any first day of Nisan at all. For the solar year doesn't start, friends, when Hillel says it starts. Neither does the first month of God's year start when Hillel says it does. In Genesis 1:14, the Word of God plainly tells us that the sun and moon oversee God's calendar, not Hillel. You know what? I have never seen the name Hillel anywhere in that scripture, have you? And in addition to that, friends, do you know that Hillel took it upon himself to start over half of his first month of Nisans in the winter season before the vernal equinox arrives? That's right, friends. He starts his festival years in the winter season 10 out of every 19 years. Hey, am I making this up? Not hardly. In the comprehensive Hebrew calendar written by acclaimed Jewish author Speyer, a Jewish rabbi and scholar, we find a list of dates when the Hebrew calendar began spring prior to the arrival of the vernal equinox. So, let's take a look at several of these dates just to confirm what takes place in Hillel's festival calendar. Because you need to know, friends, most of the day saints are following it. We really need to know what we're following, right? Now, in the years listed here on your screen, the equinox varied from March the 20th to the 22nd. Yet, the Hillel Jewish calendar, which is used by Jews all over the world, began the month of Abib or Nisan in the last month of winter prior to the spring equinox. Now, let's take a look at several of these dates. And as we can see, starting in 1975, Nisan the 1st, they set on March 13th, before the equinox, right? In 1994, they set their Nisan the 1st on March the 13th. And finally, the list that we have, in 2005, they set their first of Nisan March the 12th, way before the vernal equinox had even arrived. But you know what, friends? Using the new crescent moon that occurs on or after the vernal equinox arrives, it does what? Number one, it always starts God's first month of his year after his new year has begun. Number two, it never, ever starts the first month of Nisan in the winter season. Number three, it never allows two first days of Nisan to appear in just one of God's solar years. And number four, it never attempts to start the first month of spring before the vernal equinox has officially ended winter, the winter season. So, friends, do you now see the error and folly of calculating God's festival calendar using the new moon that occurs what? Closest to the vernal equinox? And if you're beginning to see the light and you want to follow God's biblical festival calendar in the sky, just remember that the first two factors that must be used in order to accurately calculate God's annual festivals are: you have to always use God's new waxing crescent moon to set the first day of God's months. And number two, you must always use the new waxing crescent moon that occurs on or after the vernal equinox has arrived, officially ending the winter season as it launches the spring season and kicks off a new solar year. And I hope and pray this information has settled this issue for you and all this viewing once and for all. But please don't go away, friends, because in the next chapter, I'm going to show you exactly how Hillel's calendar system sets his first day of Nisan, and you know what? I believe you'll be totally shocked and dumbfounded to find out what method Hillel actually uses to set his first day of Nisan in his Jewish festival calendar. The very festival calendar, friends, that the majority of today's saints are following. So, now let's move to part 6 of this series, and I'm going to join you there momentarily.